The entire wedding hall erupted in laughter. My bride pointed at my single dad's old gray suit and said something so cruel that even the guests looked uncomfortable. My father lowered his head. Then he quietly reached into his jacket, pulled out a gold envelope, and everything changed. Because the man everyone thought was a poor embarrassment was hiding a secret that would leave the entire room speechless. My name is Ethan Brooks, and I never thought the happiest day of my life would become the most humiliating day of my father's life. 3 years ago, I married Sophia Sterling, the woman I believed was my dream girl. Sophia came from extraordinary wealth. Her family owned luxury properties, drove expensive cars, and moved in circles where status seemed to matter more than character. I came from a completely different world. I was raised by a single father. No wealthy relatives. No trust fund. No family fortune. Just a hardworking man named Ray Brooks who sacrificed everything to give his son a chance at a better future. Dad worked construction most of his life. His hands were rough. His clothes were simple. His truck was old. And every dollar he earned seemed to go toward my future instead of his own comfort. He skipped vacations. He skipped new clothes. He skipped every luxury imaginable. Not because he had to, because he wanted me to have opportunities he never had. Growing up, I never once heard him complain. Not when bills were tight. Not when work was exhausting. Not when life knocked him down. He simply kept moving forward. That's the kind of man he was. Unfortunately, Sophia never truly appreciated him. At first, the signs were subtle. Little comments about his clothes. Small jokes about his old truck. Occasional remarks about how different our families were. I convinced myself she didn't mean anything by it. I was wrong. Wedding day has a way of revealing people's true character. And Sophia was about to reveal hers in front of everyone. Before I continue, if you enjoy emotional stories with powerful twists and unforgettable endings, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. It helps the channel more than you know. The wedding ceremony itself was beautiful. Everything seemed perfect. The flowers, the music, the venue, the photographs. It looked like something out of a movie. By the time the reception began, hundreds of guests filled the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead. Elegant decorations covered every table. The atmosphere felt magical. Then Dad arrived. He had changed into the only suit he owned. A gray suit that had clearly seen better days. It wasn't stylish. It wasn't expensive. But it was clean, pressed, respectable. To me, he looked great. To Sophia, apparently, he looked embarrassing. I noticed her staring, then whispering to her bridesmaids, then laughing. My stomach tightened. A few minutes later, she walked directly toward him. Several guests noticed and stopped their conversations. Dad smiled politely. "Congratulations, Sophia." Instead of thanking him, she slowly looked him up and down. Then she laughed. "Ray, you actually wore that suit?" The guests nearby became quiet. Dad forced a small smile. "It's the best one I have." That should have been the end of it. But Sophia wasn't finished. She shook her head and laughed again. "Honestly, Ethan should have rented you something decent." A few awkward chuckles came from nearby tables. I felt my face burning. Dad remained calm, but I could see the hurt behind his eyes. Then Sophia said something that instantly changed the mood of the entire room. She pointed toward him and said loudly, "People probably think you're part of the catering staff." Silence. Complete silence. Even her bridesmaids looked uncomfortable. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the man who spent 26 years raising me alone. The man who worked overtime so I could stay in school. The man who sacrificed everything for his family. And my bride was humiliating him in front of hundreds of people. I immediately stepped forward. "Sophia, stop." She rolled her eyes. "What? You're embarrassing yourself." She laughed. "No, Ethan. I'm just being honest." My father gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's okay, son." But it wasn't okay. Not even close. The room felt frozen. Then Dad did something unexpected. Without saying another word, he reached into the inside pocket of his old gray suit. He pulled out a gold envelope. Several guests exchanged confused looks. Sophia smirked. "What is that supposed to be?" Dad ignored the question. Instead, he walked over to Sophia's father, Victor Sterling, and handed him the envelope. Victor opened it. At first, his expression showed curiosity, then confusion, then shock. The color drained from his face. The room became completely silent. Sophia frowned. "Dad, what is it?" Victor didn't answer. He simply stared at Ray, as if he'd just discovered something impossible. Finally, he whispered, "My God!" Then he looked up. "You never told anyone?" Dad calmly shook his head. "There was never a reason to." Sophia crossed her arms. "Can someone tell me what's happening?" Victor slowly turned toward his daughter, then toward the guests, and finally spoke. "The man standing in front of you saved our family 15 years ago." Nobody understood. Victor continued, "When our company was on the verge of bankruptcy, an anonymous investor stepped in and saved everything." Gasps spread through the ballroom. Victor looked directly at Ray. That investor was him. You could have heard a pin drop. Sophia's confident smile vanished instantly. I stood frozen. My father? The anonymous investor? None of it made sense. Dad took a deep breath. Years earlier, he'd made a small investment in a startup company. That investment eventually became worth millions. But instead of changing his lifestyle, he kept living exactly as he always had. Same apartment, same truck, same clothes, same work ethic. Because wealth never changed who he was. When Victor's company nearly collapsed, Dad quietly stepped in and helped save it. He never asked for recognition, never asked for publicity, never even told his own son. The entire ballroom sat stunned. Sophia looked like she couldn't breathe. Everything she believed about my father had been wrong. Victor slowly approached Dad. Then, in front of everyone, he extended his hand. "I owe my family's success to this man." Dad shook his hand. The room erupted into applause. Guests stood from their chairs. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief. Others looked emotional. But the biggest moment came next. Because Dad finally looked directly at Sophia. Not with anger. Not with revenge. Not with hatred. Just disappointment. Then he said quietly, "Sophia, being wealthy isn't about what you own." The room became silent again. "It's about how you treat people who can do nothing for you." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Every eye in the ballroom was fixed on him. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. For the first time that day, she seemed genuinely ashamed. Because she finally understood what everyone else now saw. The old gray suit had never defined him. His character did. His sacrifices did. His kindness did. His integrity did. And none of those things could be bought. That night changed everything. Some wounds healed. Others never completely disappeared. But one lesson remained. Never judge someone's worth by their appearance. Because the richest person in that ballroom wasn't wearing the most expensive clothes. He wasn't driving the nicest car. And he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply a single father in an old gray suit who spent his entire life putting others before himself. And in the end, that made him worth more than anyone else in the room. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below with the words, "Respect over riches." And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us what truly matters in life.